let me be clear right from the start. This isn't about manipulation. It's about protection, emotional safety, personal boundaries, and your inner peace. Because not everything sacred should be shared, and not every man earns full access to who you are. So today, I'm going to walk you through 5 specific things every woman should guard closely, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Let's talk about what you must never give away too soon, if ever. Let's talk about insecurities, those quiet whispers we carry that often grow louder in the wrong hands. You know the ones I'm talking about, the thoughts that come in late at night when you're replaying that conversation you had, or second, guessing the way you showed up, or wondering if you're too much or not enough. Those moments of internal doubt are real, and they don't make you weak, they make you human. But here's the thing, those deeply personal fears, the ones rooted in your history, your wounds, and your lived experiences, are not for public consumption. And they are as definitely not for early sharing with a man you just started seeing, no matter how charming, attentive, or seemingly understanding he appears. Because here's what I want you to remember. Access to your inner world is a privilege, not a right. Too often, we mistake emotional vulnerability for emotional intimacy. And while vulnerability has its place, it needs a secure foundation to stand on. A man who hasn't proven emotional maturity, who hasn't shown consistency, accountability, or care, should not be handed the most sensitive parts of you. Because when you give someone the map to your insecurities too soon, you also give them the tools to manipulate your fears, whether they intend to or not. You don't need to explain your anxiety about abandonment just to justify why you're asking for reassurance. You don't have to tell someone your father left when you were a child just to make them understand why you value loyalty. That information is sacred, and sacred things are guarded. We live in a world that often pressures women to be emotionally available right away, to open up fast, to overshare in the name of being real. But being real doesn't mean being unfiltered with people who haven't earned your truth. Being real means being discerning. It means you know what you carry is valuable, and you choose carefully who gets to see what's inside. It's easy to think that opening up about your deepest insecurities will draw someone closer. That if you share your most fragile parts, they'll love you more for being authentic. But love doesn't come from overexposure. It comes from connection, and connection requires mutual safety. If you're the only one bringing emotional depth to the table, that's not connection, that's an imbalance. So when a man asks, "What are you afraid of?" Pause. Ask yourself, has he created an emotionally safe space, or is he just being curious? There's a difference between interest and care. One wants to know you, the other wants to hold you. Don't confuse the two, and don't underestimate how subtle emotional harm can be. Some men don't lash out in obvious ways. Some will use your insecurities as quiet leverage, throwing them back at you during conflict or withdrawing affection to punish your vulnerability. And when that happens, it chips away at your self-worth, not because you were wrong to feel, but because you gave too much to someone who gave too little. So you have to protect yourself. That doesn't mean being cold. It doesn't mean playing games. It just means pacing your openness. Let time be your filter. Let his actions over time reveal whether he's worthy of your truth. A secure man won't demand to know everything at once. He'll wait, he'll listen, and he'll honor what you choose to share when you're ready to share it. This is about self-respect. It's about maintaining your center, because you should never feel like your most fragile truths are a risk in someone else's hands. You shouldn't have to worry whether what you said in a vulnerable moment will come back to hurt you in an argument, or be used to silence you, shame you, or shape you into something smaller. Your insecurities are not baggage, they're part of your story, but that story deserves a reader who handles every page with care. And until you know he will, it's not only okay to hold some chapters back, it's necessary. Guard your soul like it's worth something. Because it is. Let's take a moment to talk about emotional history, not the surface level stuff, but the real heavy, often unspoken experiences that shaped who you are, past relationships, heartbreaks, betrayals, the wounds that still sting even when you pretend they don't. Those chapters of your life carry weight. And while you may think sharing them quickly shows honesty or depth, I want you to think twice before you hand someone your full emotional resume. Because just like with anything valuable, timing and trust matter. Not every man needs to know every detail of your past. Not every man deserves to hear the stories behind your silence, your strength, or your softness. When you give too much of that emotional history too early, what you're really doing is giving someone the script to your triggers, your patterns, your fears, and you don't yet know how they'll use that information. Sometimes we rush to overshare in hopes of being fully seen. Maybe you've been told that if you're not open, you're hiding something. That if you're guarded, you're not being real. But being real doesn't mean unloading your emotional archive into someone's lap just because they asked a few kind questions. Being real means knowing what to share, when to share it, and who's shown the maturity to receive it. There's a difference between connection and confession. Connection is mutual. It builds slowly, layer by layer, both people revealing, respecting, and responding. Confession is often one-sided. It comes from a place of needing to be validated, needing to be chosen, needing someone to know your pain so they'll stay. But here's the truth. If someone needs your emotional history to decide whether you're worth loving, they're not ready to love you the right way. Think about this. You've lived through things that were hard, relationships that left marks, situations that taught you what to never tolerate again. That's not baggage. That's wisdom. And wisdom says you don't owe everyone access to everything just because they're curious. You don't have to explain why you flinch when someone raises their voice. You don't have to walk a man through every reason you stayed too long in your last relationship or every red flag you ignored because you didn't want to be alone. That's sacred space. And sacred space is earned. Sometimes what seems like interest is actually surveillance. Some men will ask about your past not to understand you, but to measure how much you'll tolerate. They're not listening with compassion, they're listening with strategy. And if you give them the blueprint to what broke you, they'll know exactly how to bend you without breaking the deal. It happens subtly. And by the time you realize it, you're already shrinking to avoid repeating history. But you don't have to play that game. You can share what's relevant when it's relevant. You can be emotionally honest without being emotionally exposed. You can say, there are parts of my story I'm not ready to share yet, and anyone worth your time will respect that boundary. In fact, the right man will admire it because he'll know it means you have self-respect. And when you do feel ready, when time and trust have built a foundation, your story won't be a burden. It'll be a bridge. But let that happen naturally. Don't feel pressured to turn your pain into a presentation just to feel worthy of connection. You are allowed to keep pieces of your past close until you know someone is safe. Your healing doesn't need to be performed. It needs to be protected. And anyone who rushes your process is not thinking about your heart. They're thinking about their access. So hold your history like it matters, because it does. Money has a way of making people show who they really are. It can create opportunity, reveal character, and just as easily expose entitlement. And for women especially, your financial reality, what you make, what you owe, how you spend, save, or invest isn't something you need to lay out early in a relationship. In fact, it's one of the things you should protect the most. Now, I'm not saying lie. I'm not saying be deceptive. What I'm saying is this: you don't owe anyone a full financial breakdown just because you're dating. Sharing your income, your credit score, your debt, your investments, your family's money situation, none of that belongs in the first few chapters of getting to know someone. That level of access isn't just personal, it's powerful. And that power should only go to someone who's proven they won't abuse it. Too often, especially when a relationship starts to feel serious, there's this pressure to merge everything. Emotions, routines, finances, quickly. But the truth is, your financial reality is more than just numbers. It represents your independence, your choices, the life you've built. And no matter how generous you are or how trusting you feel, you have to pause and ask, has this person shown me they respect what I've worked for? Not just admire it, not just benefit from it, respect it. Because it's easy for someone to say they love that you're successful. It's easy to compliment your drive, your ambition, your lifestyle. But admiration can turn to resentment in a heartbeat when power dynamics shift, and you won't always see it coming. Sometimes it shows up in subtle comments. You don't need to work so hard. Or Why do you care so much about saving? Or maybe it's jokes about how you always have money or expectations that you'll cover things without question. Before you know it, your financial stability becomes someone else's crutch, or worse, their leverage. You are not a safety net. You are not an ATM for someone's convenience. And you are not obligated to explain how much you earn, what you've saved, or what you plan to do with your money until a relationship has been built on something deeper than comfort or chemistry. And let's talk about debt, because that's part of this conversation too. Some people will try to use your vulnerability about debt, student loans, credit cards, family obligations as a way to question your judgment or diminish your confidence. But your past financial choices don't define your worth. They are private and they're yours to manage, not someone else's to critique. The right man will never make your financial reality feel like something you have to justify. He won't ask for access before trust has been firmly established. And if he does, that's your cue to step back and reassess. Because when someone pushes too quickly for financial intimacy, it's not about love. It's about control, comfort, or entitlement. None of those are foundations for a healthy relationship. You can build a life with someone without handing over every detail of your financial landscape in the early stages. You can say, I'm working on my financial goals, and leave it there. You can decline to co-sign, to lend, to merge bills, to split purchases that don't make sense. And you don't have to feel guilty for setting those boundaries. Your money story is yours. It reflects your hard work, your sacrifices, and the future you're trying to create. And just like any valuable part of you, it deserves protection. Anyone who truly wants to walk beside you won't need full access to prove that. They'll show you who they are with how they treat your boundaries, not how much they can get from your openness. You don't have to explain your pockets to prove your heart. One of the most sacred things a woman carries is her vision for her life, her goals, her timeline, her dreams, where she wants to live, what kind of career she's building, whether she wants marriage, kids, travel, a certain lifestyle, or peace above all else. These plans might not be written down anywhere, but they're felt. And too often, women are taught to shape those plans around whoever walks into their life, especially if that man shows a little potential or interest. But here's what I want to say clearly. Your life plan is not a negotiation, not in the early stages of a relationship, not just because someone likes you, not because you're worried about missing your chance. Your plan is a roadmap to your future. And unless someone is showing up with a consistency, maturity, and vision to build with you, not just benefit from you, there's no need to hand them the blueprint. It's easy to feel like you're supposed to share everything up front, your 5-year plan, your ideal number of kids, how soon you want to settle down, or what your retirement goals are. And if you're someone who knows exactly what you want, that clarity is powerful. But it's also vulnerable because the wrong person can take that information and shift into who you think they are just long enough to keep you close while never actually moving in that direction. And then suddenly you're adjusting your timeline, softening your standards, shrinking your goals just to keep the relationship alive. Not because you changed, but because he never actually aligned with you in the first place and you were too far in by the time you realized it. So here's a shift in perspective. You don't need to declare all your plans right away. You need to observe. Pay attention to how he talks about the future. Does he speak in I or we? Does he listen when you speak about your goals, or does he redirect the conversation back to himself? Is he supportive when you talk about your ambitions, or does he subtly downplay them? And most importantly, does his lifestyle reflect someone who's actually moving toward anything or just drifting? Because if a man isn't building a future of his own, he has no business rearranging yours. You can absolutely have meaningful conversations about values, direction, and lifestyle compatibility. But compatibility is not the same as convenience. Don't let someone mirror your dreams just to keep a seat at your table. Let time and action show you whether your lives naturally flow in the same direction without you having to twist yourself into alignment if you want marriage and he's not sure. Believe him if you want children and he keeps dodging the conversation. Pay attention if you're focused on building a business, traveling the world, or moving to a new city, and he's only interested in what's comfortable right now. That's data. You don't have to fight for alignment. True alignment reveals itself through consistency, not convincing. It's okay to keep some of your vision private in the beginning, not out of secrecy, but out of self-protection. Because your dreams are precious, and sharing them with the wrong person too soon can cloud your judgment. You'll start imagining what A could be instead of facing what A is. You'll hear him say, "That sounds amazing," and mistake that for commitment. But words without action are just noise. You deserve a partner who doesn't just nod along, but actually shows up, who supports your vision and brings one of his own. And if that alignment isn't there, you're allowed to walk away with peace. It doesn't mean your plan was too big or too specific. It means you were wise enough not to settle for less. Your dreams are not up for compromise. They're up for partnership. And until someone proves they're building in the same direction, you owe no one the map. One of the most subtle ways women lose themselves in relationships is by over-explaining what they need emotionally, laying it all out too soon, almost like giving someone a cheat sheet. Here's exactly how I like to be loved. Here's how I need to be supported. Here's what to say when I'm anxious. Here's what I expect when I'm upset. And on the surface, that can feel like healthy communication, like clarity. But here's the problem. It often becomes emotional labor, not emotional connection. When you hand over your emotional expectations too early and too completely, what you're really doing is doing his work for him. You're giving him the roadmap to your heart before he's even shown he knows how to navigate his own. And what ends up happening is that you're not really seeing a him. You're seeing his ability to follow instructions. But following instructions is not the same as understanding. It's not the same as effort. It's not the same as care. See, part of emotional intimacy is discovery. It's someone taking the time to learn you, not because you gave them a list, but because they're genuinely present. They watch how you react. They ask follow-up questions. They remember small details. They show up in ways that say, I may not know everything about you, but I'm paying attention. That's real emotional investment. But when you tell a man too early how to love you, how to apologize to you, how to be there for you, without him ever having to earn that information, what you're really doing is hoping that if you explain yourself well enough, you'll finally be loved right. That if you lay it out perfectly, there will be no room for disappointment. But people aren't recipes. You can't give someone all the right ingredients and expect them to bake something beautiful if they were never planning to cook in the first place. Let him reveal his emotional capacity through his behavior, not just how he treats you when things are easy, but how he responds when you're quiet, when you're overwhelmed, when you're not your best. Does he lean in or does he get frustrated? Does he ask or does he assume you need that information before you offer a manual on how to love you? Because if you skip that step, you won't know if he's truly attuned or just performing. You are not responsible for teaching a grown man how to be emotionally present. If you're guiding him, supporting him, encouraging growth, yes, that's partnership. But if you're constantly spelling out your emotional needs just to be heard, that's parenting. And the more you step into that role, the more he'll let you, until you realize you've become the caretaker of the relationship while he simply coasts. So it's okay to withhold certain expectations at the start, not because you're being secretive or playing games, but because you're allowing the relationship to show you its natural rhythm. You're watching to see if there's space for your feelings, not just room for them, but respect. You're choosing to be known, not just managed. And here's the truth. Your emotional needs aren't too much. They're not unrealistic. They're not a burden, but they do require someone who wants to meet them. Someone who's not just in the relationship for the good times, but who's emotionally fluent enough to recognize and respond to your internal world without needing you to draw a map every time. You deserve to be loved in a way that feels safe, steady, and deeply seen. But that starts with you knowing that your emotional world isn't something to perform, defend, or package neatly for someone else's comfort. It's something to be honored by the right person in the right time through the right actions. Don't hand someone the instructions to your heart. Watch first to see if they're even willing to build something real with it. If there's one thing you should never feel guilty about protecting, it's your peace. That calm, grounded place inside you, that clarity you fought to create after everything you've been through. It's not up for negotiation. It's not something you owe anyone access to, and it's definitely not something you should sacrifice in the name of love, attention, or keeping the peace with someone who keeps disturbing it. Here's the reality. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It doesn't argue to be understood. Peace is quiet, strong, and still. And when a relationship starts to cost you that stillness, when you find yourself constantly second guessing over, explaining, adjusting, or tolerating what you never would have before, that's not love. That's a warning sign. You may not even notice it at first. It starts subtly. You go a little quiet during conversations because you don't want to trigger his mood. You make yourself smaller in social settings because he seems uncomfortable when you shine too bright. You laugh things off when they bother you because bringing it up feels like too much work. And before you know it, you've slowly stepped out of alignment with yourself, not because you wanted to, but because keeping him happy started to feel safer than being honest. That's not peace. That's performance. That's survival. And no relationship built on that kind of constant managing is ever going to give you what you truly need.